We're away for a couple of days, so I just brought a few supplies so I could create wherever I am. The first thing I brought was a smaller sketchbook, so I didn't have to bring my large one, and it's specifically for watercolors. And then, of course, I brought my little mini watercolor set, artist tape, watercolor brush pens, fine liner pens in 1 and 5, and white gel pens and also in 1 and 5, and a pencil and eraser. Sometimes a change of scenery is all it takes for creativity to start flowing again. Creativity can happen anywhere, and it helps by noticing the beauty around you. I started this journal page by taping off some sections. This technique helps you create fun shapes and patterns in an easier way. I started with blue first because blue seems to calm my mind the most, and I really needed to feel that while I was traveling. I noticed that my colors weren't going on very smoothly at first, and then I realized it was from the watercolor brush pens. This was my first time using them, and I think they had some sort of coating on them. So pro tip, if you do get some of these, probably depending on the brand, just make sure you rinse them off first, maybe even with a little bit of soap and water. I continued to pick colors intuitively, and of course yellow was my next color. It's one of my favorites. To me, it's like sunshine. I then added some brown to that same yellow and put it along the edges just for some depth. And then I blended it with a little bit of water. And then I did the same for the blue, adding a little bit of brown to darken it, and just doing the edges and blending it out. I felt like giving it some contrast, so I added some orange dots to the yellow, and I just kind of let it bleed however it wanted to go. And then I used that same color and I muted it with some brown once again, just so that it wasn't so bright. It gives it kind of like a plum color. And then I took a really bright orangish red, and I added that to the final shapes. This gives it a pop of color without being too dramatic. And then I did the same thing for shading with that color, where I added a little bit of brown around the edges. After those watercolors completely dried, I slowly peeled the tape off. You have to be pretty careful doing this or you'll rip the paper. If you start to rip the paper, just start on the other side and slowly go the other way. I find this extremely satisfying and calming. That's all I had time for at the hotel, so then I tried to do some in the car, but with the bouncing around and the lighting, it just wasn't working out. And I wanted to really finish this, so when I got home, I'd worked on it a little bit more when I had some free time. I wanted to make those shapes a little bit more interesting, so I just took a little bit of a darker blue and outlined the edges and rounded them out. And then I took a lighter blue and put that over the darker one to just give it a more blended look. I then did the same thing with the plum color. I added a purple and a light pink over that and blended that out as well. Then I decided to add some more Zen doodles because I was feeling a little bit overwhelmed from the trip. And so I just did some more lines. And I wanted to give this a different feel from the other ones. And so I just did some curved lines first with a pen. I then took a black pastel and I went over those lines again to just give it kind of a hazy look. And then I took a white pastel and I went over that a little bit underneath each black line to give it a highlight. I then darkened the edges so that way it would smooth out any lines that went over. This gives it a cleaner look. I added one more Zen doodle, and this time I just did diagonal lines back and forth all the way up. This just gives your page interesting details and movement. I then took that same black soft pastel and I outlined the edges to give it more of a soft edge. I also gave it a highlight with the white, just like I did the other lines. In that moment, I felt like it needed one more layer, so I got out my magazines and looked for something that would add to it. I found this awesome checkered floor and added it to my page. I love the surrealism look that it gives. I hope this inspires you to create anywhere that you are.